Rhodesian army made me a sergeant once. It wasn't promotion in the true sense of the word. It was just something that suited them at the time, and I was told that I would have to report to GHQ. Before I did so, I called around at our battalion store, and I spoke to a corporal standing there behind the counter, and he said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "I'd like a rifle and 80 rounds of ammunition." He said, "I can't give you that. What else do you want?" I said, "I want 3 stripes." And he looked at me, but I had a written order with me, which I pushed across the counter for him to read. And he looked at this, didn't say a word, turned on his heel, disappeared into the back of the store, and returned presently with a rifle, which he put down on the counter, and my 3 stripes, which he gave me. And then he said, "I'm sorry, Sarge, how many rounds did you say you wanted?" And I thought, oh, rank is a fantastic thing. It really gets so much done. Anyway, I went off to GHQ, but I still had to report to the battalion from time to time to draw my pay. And so folk became used to seeing me there with sergeant stripes on my sleeve. And time went by, and I was finished at GHQ, and I came back to the battalion, back to my old rank, which was fine for me, and off into the bush. Now, out in the field, in the Rhodesian army, it was impossible to tell the difference between a rifleman and a general. We wore no insignia whatsoever. And so on a day, the helicopter took us to the scene of a contact, and we were dropped off there, and the chopper flew off to our right to go and see if it could assist, and indeed it did. The chopper tech noticed a group of gooks running off, and he opened fire on them, and we could hear the sound of gunfire from the aircraft where we were. He managed to nail one. He got one of the gooks in the leg, but the others got away. And this wounded gook crawled into a clump of bush. The chopper pilot came back to me, and he said, "Look, I'm going to direct you into this undergrowth, and I'll tell you more or less where we saw him, and see if you can find him." And so we swept forward very cautiously, but we couldn't find him. And the chopper hovered above us, giving us instructions, and we went to the left and we went to the right, we went forward, but we couldn't find him anywhere. And then it began to rain, and the pilot said to me on the radio, "I've got good news and I've got bad news. Which would you like first?" And I said, "Well, give me the good news." And he said, "The good news is I can't fly in this weather, so I'm going home." And I said, "Well, that's very nice. And what's the bad news?" And he said, "You're going to get wet." And he disappeared and left us there. Well, this gook survived the contact, and we became aware of this a few weeks later when we started getting reports. He'd been seen first in one village and then in another, and he seemed to be quite badly injured. His SKS had been shot up as well, and from the description that we got, we understood that he had tied the weapon together with bits of string and an old inner tube, and he was using this as a crutch. And so we gave him a nickname. We called him the Hobbly-Gobbly, because he hobbled around the countryside and gobbled up everybody's food. He seemed pretty harmless on the surface. We got no indication from anybody that he was threatening at all in his attitude. He would merely come at night and ask for food, and when this was given to him, he would just disappear quietly in the bush. Well, we couldn't leave him to just wander around like that. After all, he was still a potential killer, and so he became quite a distraction to us, and often we would have to leave what we were doing and go and investigate these reports and see if we could track him down and find him. But he was so elusive, we couldn't really get hold of this man. And one particular evening, our platoon lieutenant sat pondering this whole situation, and he very astutely and very accurately anticipated where the Hobbly-Gobbly would be feeding next. And so the next day he took what available men there were in the camp and threw a cordon around this particular village. It was a very loose cordon, and tried to see if they could locate the Hobbly-Gobbly. Well, he was there, and he was aware of the security force presence, because he managed to slip out of the village, through this cordon, and disappeared into the bush. Well, when I got back to camp a few hours later from another operation, I heard about this, and I thought, let me have a bit of fun here. So I pretended to be quite annoyed at the thought that these men had neglected their duty, so to speak, and allowed this man to slip through their fingers. We had an improvised volleyball court there. It was just a clearing in the bush, and I formed the men up there. I just shouted for everybody that wasn't doing anything to get onto the volleyball court, and they did. And I formed them up, brought them to attention, and I gave them the order to right dress. And you know, at that time, a lot of those guys outranked me, but nobody said a word. They were as quiet as mice, and they obeyed my orders. Open order, march! And they did that for inspection port arms. And they did that. So then I started checking the weapons, but oh dear me, there were one or two that were in a terrible state. And I thought, I can't stop this joke now. I mean, and I can't single out these men. That wouldn't look good. So I just said to them all that they were a terrible, useless shower, and I was disappointed in the turnout. And they had half an hour to get their weapons cleaned and be back again on the volleyball court for another inspection. And half an hour later, they pitched up. I don't know where the platoon sergeant was. He kept himself busy in the ops tent, never even poked his head out to see what was going on outside. I don't know where our lieutenant was. But the men were very obedient, and I checked everything was fine, and I was happy with that, and I dismissed them. Well, we get to the end of the call-up, and we're standing around at Battalion HQ waiting to demob. And one of the clerks comes out of the building, and I don't know what he had for me, a letter or something. And he needed me, so he yelled out my name. But of course he yelled out my rank first of all, Corporal! And I saw heads turning my way, and a few voices said, Corporal? Aren't you a sergeant? And I just shook my head, and they said, You're a sergeant? I said, No, nothing lasts forever. So I said, and by the way, I'm not a corporal, I'm a lance corporal. A lance corporal! I said, actually, a temporary lance corporal, and I walked off. Oh, I was getting some really caustic remarks thrown in my direction. But you know, the real story was not so much that, but the real story was the Hobbly-Gobbly. When we returned to that area about 6 weeks later, I heard that a police anti-terrorist unit had come across his remains. He had eventually died from his wounds. And I thought to myself, oh, I wonder what it was like for him. You know, all on his own, no help, no support, no medical attention, looking over his shoulder every moment of the way, knowing that we'd be hunting him down, and then still, in the end, dying alone, without anybody near you. And I suppose there are so many stories to a war, irrespective of what side you're on.